Welcome to the channel. My name's Stu and this is a story about returning to play electric guitar after putting it down nearly 40 years ago and the lessons learned to get up to speed with the many changes in the music industry when looking to purchase guitars, amps and pedals. So do check out the previous videos, which is the introduction to my journey. So I've got the guitar. More to come on that, so stay tuned. This beautiful 2019 American Pro Series 1 model, but nothing to play it through. Now, before I show you the actual amplifier I chose, once again, I needed to get back to the internet, searching and investigating various amplifiers from a range of manufacturers. Now, 40 years on, the one thing that really struck me, virtually all the companies I was used to were still in business and pushing out not only new amplifier designs, but reissues of old favourites from days gone by. In fact, I was taken aback seeing the prices that some of those old amplifiers and cabinets were fetching from both collectors and those wanting to own a part of history. You know, when I think of the equipment I sold back in the 80s for not a lot. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, the pandemic had locked everything down, so I had to do my best to interpret various equipment reviews available online. Now, I will say, I, along with many others, really grateful to all who take the time to review products that can be so helpful in making an informed choice. However, many product reviews can help only just so far. And there's no doubt about it, if you want to hear an amp in action, nothing beats taking your own guitar and any effects pedals that you might use along to a shop that will allow you to thoroughly test the product that you have in mind. Because when listening to someone demonstrating certain equipment products on the internet, there are so many variables to consider that the sounds that you're hearing could be misleading. And maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you've purchased a piece of kit only to be disappointed. Comment below if that's been you. Now, it might be 40 years ago since I last played through various amplifiers, but I still remember the tones well. In fact, the last setup I used as a performing rock musician back in the early 1980s can be seen here in this photo shoot before it was finally sold off. It's actually not a Marshall valve head, but in fact a Laney valve head that was completely stripped and customized, and it was rebadged Marshall. Long story why. The 4x12 cabinet was also a refurbished 60s Marshall unit with custom speakers fitted. So today, my return to playing and writing music has changed, and the days of overdriven Marshall stacks, they're long gone. And because of that, I didn't think that Marshall amplification would be on my shopping list. However, as I mentioned before, my dear friend and an editor at our production film company would surprise me with something he had stashed away in a cupboard somewhere. And he dropped it off, and here we have this Marshall 100 watt combo. It's a Valve State 2000 AVT 275. It's a hybrid, kind of both valve and digital, and let me tell you, it weighs a ton. Now, as I say, it was during the pandemic lockdown, and this gave me a chance to at least, you know, try out and see what the Marshall sound was like again, because they were definitely a favourite amp maker of mine back in the day. And as it would turn out, this enabled me to definitively set aside Marshall as a contender. It was just not the tone I was looking for. Now, I know there are a lot of variations on these designs that are out there that you can purchase, but with the pandemic shutdown, I just wanted to make a prompt decision, and sometimes it's so easy to procrastinate. So there was one amplifier I had long admired for its beautiful liquid-like tones one I couldn't afford as a teenager, and that was the Fender Twin Reverb. I had an older friend who had one, along with a 1960s pre-CBS Stratocaster, and I always thought the combination just sounded amazing. I loved listening to him play. So I went onto the Fender website, and there it was, along with another favourite, the Princeton. Of course, those combo amps are not only expensive, but they're heavy. And while modern manufacturing has improved stability of these old iconic valve amps, reliability was still something that figured in the back of my mind. I had no problem buying the American Fender Stratocaster online, but purchasing an expensive amplifier without physically, checking it out kind of left me a little bit unsure. Then I saw a Fender advert for the Fender Champion 100-watt Twin, a digital combo with built-in effects, and the price was really most agreeable. In fact, it seemed too cheap to be true. However, my dealings with transistor-based amplifiers back in the 70s, they kind of did make me a little hesitant. I remember my old Marshall 100-watt lead amplifier, and this had booster switches to get overdrive, and frankly, it wasn't very pleasant. I wonder if any of you ever remember that one or have owned it, and do comment below. I think they're quite rare. You don't really see them. That picture I'm showing was quite difficult to actually find. So certainly I've seen advances in digital technology in the film world, and so I decided, given the excellent price point, I'll give this Fender Champion a try. So I'll keep this short. The amp arrived, and while it was impressive for the money, and indeed it had a very nice tone, to my ear, it lacked something. It almost sounded like it was clipping or struggling with the wide tonal range of the Strat. If you dug in hard on the Strat, it just didn't seem to deal with it right. And on top of that, the built-in modelling effects that came with the amp, to my ears, I mean, they were okay, but they just didn't convince me. Now, sure, it's been 40 years since I owned a pedal board, but no, these onboard effects, they just seem to be missing something. Now, don't get me wrong, the range of Fender amplifiers at that price point are very capable and will delight many guitar players. But when you're used to hearing dynamic tonal range, and I mentioned in my introduction video, I've worked in broadcast and cinema audio, music, sound design, production. So I might be getting old and deaf, but I am used to hearing good audio. And so I might just be starting out again, but I just knew that the amplifier had to go. I'm sure many of you will know what I mean when a piece of kit is just not hitting the spot for you. So, thankfully, the pandemic regulations relaxed, and I was able to physically return the Champion to the music store for a direct exchange, along with some payment for something that was going to get me closer to the tone I was after. Enter the Fender Twin Reverb Tone Master. So, quick disclosure, I'm not sponsored or paid to review any products I mention, so what you're getting is my own observations and opinions. Now, the first version of the Tone Master model is based on the classic all-valve Fender Twin Reverb, and yet it's digital. There's not a valve to be seen anywhere. There's no mistaking that classic Fender Twin silver face look, and it not only looks identical, save the little Tone Master badge down in the corner, its clean tones and beautiful reverb sound excellent. And a real bonus, you can lift this thing with your finger. Made of pine, it's strong and very light. It's covered in a hard-wearing black vinyl, a tough silver face speaker cloth, handy support struts to angle the unit. And before we look at the control panel, if we have a look at the back here, as you can see, it's an open-face design, and you can see the two Jensen N12K neodymium speakers, which help to keep the weight down. Now, some folks have done speaker replacements in a bid to get further dynamic tone. And I have to say that on hearing those alterations, yes, you can get the minutiae of altering tone, etc. However, for the costs involved, it's just not something I would do. And I should say that in years gone by, I have changed out speakers in all kinds of cabinets. And of course, in certain cases, you can really improve the tone, or at least create a different tone more suitable to what you're wanting to achieve. But for me, to do that with this amplifier, it's just not worth tampering with. As a digital product, is it reliable? And I've heard concerns regarding reliability because of the digital technology used, and thereby the concern being that maybe a repair, it may either be very expensive or perhaps impractical. Now, considering the cost of these amps, that is something to think about, and it would be no small concern. But I have to say that I've had this amp for a couple of years, and to date, I've not had any issues. Now, I have to say I don't play live gigs or undertake punishing tours, which will test the mettle of any product. So for my usage, only time is going to tell. As I've mentioned, back in the 1970s, I used all kinds of amplification, valve and transistor, and both types have died on me or they've needed maintenance. What I would say is, generally speaking, when it comes to well-recognized brands known for quality, and yes, everyone messes up at some point, you should expect a good product. And as an aside, you do tend to often get independent companies arising who specialize in repairs or refurbishment of quality branded products. So I don't really see that as a concern. Unless you know differently, then do comment below. So what do I like? And of course, this is just my personal opinion. Well, number one, it's got that classic Fender look, and it's light and it's easy to transport. And again, for me personally, it's part of the nostalgia, like choosing the Fender guitar. It's that historic connection. And for me, that's part of the fun. Two, it's clean channel. It sounds great with any guitar, but put a Fender Tele or Stratocaster through it with a touch of reverb, and it's just such a beautiful combination. Number three, well, it takes pedals very well, and there will be another video on that. Do look out for that. Being a twin with a lot of headroom, this really helps to keep the effects nice and clear. And I have to say, I've never noticed any muddiness. Number four, it's loud and more than capable of handling just about any live performance situation you could throw at it. What don't I like? Well, number one, despite the attenuator on the back panel, even set to its lowest setting, it's very loud. And personally, I don't like that setting. It seems to lose something. It's as if the dynamic nature of the tone is somewhat thinner. That's my take on it. I didn't purchase this type of amp to overdrive it. They're not particularly well known for doing that, but for those considering this model, attempting to overdrive the amplifier at low volumes, it's really not possible because it's just too loud if you're going to play this in your home. Yes, you can push the volume. You can push the volume up or bring the volume to a point, and then you can use an effects pedal to bring that volume back down. And yes, it can get gritty, but for my taste, I just didn't like the sound it produced. So as I mentioned, I only use this as a clean amplifier platform, because as you will see in videos to come, I went on the hunt for another amplifier that would give me that valve crunch at controllable volumes. So for overdrive sounds, I purchased a number of pedals, and to that end this amplifier responds very well indeed. For those of you who'd like to know how things were recorded, in this example I'm using a Sennheiser mic, an MD421, a Series 2, and I prefer this for the Stratocaster as it has a slightly warmer feel to the popular Shure SM57 that often gets used. Placement is usually either at the edge of the speaker dust cap or in the middle of the cone, so testing the mic across the speaker should determine your own preference. Joe miking, of course, is very popular in recording studios. So the MD421 is set about an inch from the speaker cloth, which in turn is plugged into a mixer, which in turn is plugged into the camera, which records at 24-bit 48 kHz. In this example, the Stratocaster is played through the Fender Twin over one of the many backing tracks that I've made available. What don't I like? Not something I'm concerned about, but I'll mention it. Some would have liked to have seen a headphone facility on this, and perhaps the newer model has one. I'm not sure, but it's not something I need either way. Number 3, the volume control is very sensitive at the beginning of travel, and it can get very loud very quickly if you're not careful. And to be frank, it would have been nice to have had a more incremental pot. You know, we have a number of broadcast mixers in the studio here, and they're just tiny little things. But the volume pots are first class, although I should mention that despite their tiny little size, they are all more expensive than this amplifier. So maybe there's something to the components being very costly. I don't know. It would have just been nice to have had better volume control there. It does seem to be a common thing with many guitar amplifiers. Now, it seems like every month there's a new product hitting the market, be it valve driven, be it a modeling amp, a multi-effects unit, or just simply plug and play software. At the end of the day, I don't like to get too distracted. My goal is not just enjoying playing guitar again, it's writing and composing and onto recording. It's about staying focused. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, because when I think back to the old days, the focus, it tended to be on the goal, namely trying to get a management deal, trying to get gigs, and of course a recording contract. And sure, equipment was fun to look at in the shops. Remember, there was no internet back in those days. But the focus was on the end game. And I think today, with so much social media, there can be a tendency to get caught up in the mechanics, unless, of course, that's actually the hobby that you have. Be interesting to hear your thoughts on this. So as mentioned, while the Fender Twin Reverb and this Tone Master generally satisfied my requirement for clean tones and quality reverb, it was clear I needed to get back onto the internet and figure out what was I going to do about effects I was going to need, namely overdrive. And for that, I took a rather different path, something way out of my comfort zone. And I would say, who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks? So you can follow that journey in the next video. And if you like the content, then subscribing, hitting the usual buttons are much appreciated. And please do add your own comments below, or perhaps any questions you think I can help with. Until next time, the journey continues. Take care.